Right, here is my final bit of this lecture, my second provocation that I would like you to write about. It's a bit out of left field, and I hope it's not too much. I hope it makes sense. Anyway, here we go. Liberalism, I would contend, is an inherently optimistic ideology. It aims for things like peace and prosperity, which obviously includes equality. There's no point aiming for prosperity for a chosen few and when the large masses are not prospering. And I think it shares those aims of peace and prosperity with most serious political ideologies. However, liberalism, unlike something like socialism or fascism, aims for these things like peace and prosperity in the long term. And it's basically pretty willing to accept short-term increases in inequality in things like wealth, income, and power in order to pursue these goals in the long term. And this is a fairly controversial position. On the side of those that say that it's legitimate and that you have to view liberalism in the long term include, I would say most prominently today, Barack Obama. Barack Obama is constantly talking about being on the right side of history and needing to retain the high moral ground and saying, yes, I appreciate that there are shortcomings in today's America, his America, from, let's say, when he was president, from 2008 to 2016, he would say, yes, I appreciate that people are suffering, that there are racial inequalities, that there's this, there's that there are these problems, and we are not living up to the principles of liberalism that we espouse. I acknowledge that, Obama would say. But look at liberalism in the long run. Look at the achievements it's made. Look at the prosperity it's built, the people it's brought out of poverty, the emancipatory potential of liberal principles, and so on and so on. And he would always say, we don't look at the short-term battles. We look at the long-term war all the time as progressives within liberal societies. So basically what I'm saying is Obama looks at these problems in American society and says, not the principles are wrong, we need to tear them down, start again, think of new ideas on which to found this society. No, he says we need to pursue an ever greater union. We need to go back to the founding principles of our liberal society and perfect them ever more and keep striving for the same things. Right? Not the principles are wrong, not our mode of pursuing them has been wrong, but the principles are right, stay the course. Look at the long run of the situation. Okay, on the other side of the ledger is everyone that says, well, a lot of people are suffering in the short term, and a lot of us aren't going to be around for the long term. A really good example of this, again, actually in the realm of race relations in America, is the Nina Simone song "Mississippi Goddamn." She's got all these lines like, "You keep on saying go slow," and it's difficult not to have sympathy with this position of, well, surely saying look at the long run and don't worry too much about these inequalities in the short run is quite a useful fig leaf for those with power and wealth in today's society. And a very happy escape, a get out of jail card for them to continue accruing wealth and power. Very reasonable position as well. I'm not taking a position on this debate. I think it's important, and I think it's important that you're aware of it. But instead, I want this to be the foundation of my interest. Okay, but instead of resolving this debate one way or the other, I just want to establish that liberalism's insistence on a long-run view and its willingness to accept short-term failures to deliver on its promises in order to pursue these long-run aims of peace and prosperity, I would say constitutes a structural weakness within liberalism as an ideology. There is a persistent shortfall between what liberalism promises as a political ideology and what it delivers. And that produces a legitimacy gap. And this legitimacy gap expresses itself, manifests in things like trust deficits that we looked at last week, and a growing belief that the system is rigged. And it produces anger which can be drawn on as a resource by populist leaders who aim not to perfect liberalism's principles, but rather to undermine liberalism itself. So there's a structural weakness within liberalism born of the fact that there is a perpetual shortfall between the promises liberalism makes and what liberal societies actually deliver. And this is born of liberalism's long-run view. And this leads us to an interesting viewpoint for thinking about the situation we currently find ourselves. For the last 250 years, liberalism has essentially governed a period of unrivaled wealth creation and economic growth. Its main job, in one way of thinking, has been to distribute the goods produced by this extraordinary economic growth. That may be coming to an end, that period of growth. We may be entering a new phase of economic and social development where governance increasingly, instead of making sure that everyone is included and everyone gets a share in the goods that fall from economic growth, instead the role of governance may be to manage and equitably distribute bads, risks, and it's not clear to me that liberalism is sufficiently rigorous to do that job. Okay, so why would this be a turning point in society? This thesis that the ideas that I'm drawing on are from a sociologist called Ulrich Beck, no longer with us, Ulrich Beck, who wrote a thesis called the Risk Society thesis. This is where the ideas come from. I'm not going to describe the whole thing, but if you'd like to know more. But just to illuminate the points I'm making, think of the deaths of despair problem in the US from around 2010. As part of the spiraling inequality and the stagnation in wages in America, there has been an opioid epidemic, a massive overconsumption of opioids by millions upon millions of people. And this has led to a lot of early deaths. And for the first time in America's history, we've actually seen the life expectancy of certain groups within America, most importantly white men, most importantly not because they're intrinsically important, but most importantly in explaining what's going on electorally in the last decade, we've seen the life expectancy of this group fall for the first time. Life expectancy is a really useful metric for us as social scientists. It captures together quality of life in all sorts of ways. Access to healthcare, but also education, eating habits, exercise habits, quality of relationships in one life, etc. Like good things lead to a longer life, bad things on all these different fronts lead to a shorter life. And a lowered life expectancy for a big cohort like this probably indicates that the quality of life is actually getting worse in some sense. And this is a new thing. And it indicates that for certain groups within American society, the trajectory is no longer upward. And this is a very substantial psychological change. So for the long sweep of liberalism, liberal society, a lot of people have done it hard. A lot of people have worked very hard for a very small amount of money and sacrificed a lot personally in order that their children would have better lives than them. And we may be getting to a point where that's not really a very believable proposition. It may be unlikely that a lot of people having children today will be able to secure better prospects, better lives for their children than the lives they had. Which rather changes things, which rather changes the foundations on which liberalism rests and the credibility of this liberal insistence on viewing things in the long run. Right? If the long run prospects for part of society is on the up and for the rest of society is on the down, then we have to not worry too much about these short run problems and these short run inequalities because the long run principles are very good, ceases to be very strong as a political claim. Secondly, consider the challenge of climate change. Climate change may involve transitioning to a zero-sum economy, a zero-sum growth economy, an economy that is no longer growing and in which more wealth for one group necessarily means less group for another. Right? So if the economy is growing, then me getting more money over time doesn't necessarily mean that someone else is getting less money over time. But if we're in an economy that's no longer growing, which may be a necessary component of our response to climate catastrophe, then liberalism ceases to be liberal governance ceases. The challenge of liberal governance ceases fundamentally to be the distribution of goods and the assurance that everyone in society is partaking in the benefits of economic growth, and instead it's about managing the social conflicts that arise from these zero-sum interactions between different groups in society. And it's not a challenge that liberalism has ever faced. So we stand at potentially, I mean, who knows what the future looks like, right? I could be a million miles off track here. But certainly it's clear that we are entering a period of low growth economy relative to the 20th century, to the high growth rates that we've enjoyed for the last 100 years. We are entering a new period of structurally slower economic growth. And I would say this makes the challenges liberalism faces today, or governance of liberal societies, substantially different in the 21st century to what they were in the 20th century. So my question that I would like you to write a couple of paragraphs on, to give me your thoughts on, is liberalism fit for governance of a zero-sum growth economy, an economy that ceases to grow? I hope that makes sense. Don't worry too much if it didn't. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you'd like to give an opinion on who you would give the flute to, that's great. I will ask you in the week 5 seminar, and I'm very keen to hear your opinions. Okay, that's all from me. I'm very sorry we couldn't have a seminar this week, and thank you for your patience in getting through this lecture. I look forward to reading your responses to the questions I posed on these last two slides. I would also, the final thing is, please don't email your work to me. Just drop it in the deposit box in the week 4 folder on Moodle. Okay, see you in a week.